Welcome to Heartbreaker, your love radio. In the beginning, Emily and Michael seemed like the perfect couple. Married for 5 years, they shared many memories and dreams. Michael worked long hours as a project manager at a construction company to secure their future, while Emily kept the house in order, tended to the garden, and cooked meals whenever he arrived home late at night. But as time went by, the distance between them grew. The nights when Michael used to come home early so they could have dinner together became rare. He now spent most of his time at the office, dealing with deadlines and difficult clients. Emily, who once brightened up at the sound of the door handle, now watched the hours pass alone on the couch, feeling the weight of loneliness. One night after Michael finally came home from work, she was waiting for him at the table. "Michael, we need to talk," said Emily, her voice serious, almost desperate. He put his briefcase on the counter and sighed. I know. I'm working too much. But it's for us, Emily. Things have been so tough out there." She pressed her lips together, trying to stay calm. "It's not just about work, Michael. We never talk anymore. We barely spend time together. I feel like I'm disappearing here." Michael frowned, unable to hide his frustration. "I know it's hard. But it's my job to keep the bills paid, isn't it? And it's my job to take care of the house," but she took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "That can't be all we are. It's not just about paying the bills. I need you." Michael looked away, feeling pressure from both sides. He knew she was right, but he was trapped in the endless cycle of work. "I'll try to come home earlier," he muttered, more to end the conversation than to change his plans. In the following days, Michael did come home earlier, but he was always exhausted, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His conversations were short, often interrupted by the ringing of his phone. Emily felt their bond loosening with each passing hour, and the house increasingly felt like an empty place, a reflection of the loneliness she was struggling to confront. Scott, Michael's younger brother, arrived in town with all the energy and enthusiasm that always characterized him. He moved there to start a new job as a sales representative. When Michael mentioned his brother's arrival, Emily was receptive to the idea. She remembered Scott as the funny brother, always teasing Michael and entertaining everyone around him. On the first weekend after the move, Scott visited his brother and sister-in-law. Michael was, as usual, busy with work responsibilities, but Scott made up for his absence with his easygoing humor. "Emily, the garden looks amazing," he said, glancing out the window. "You've always had a knack for this stuff." She smiled, pleased with the compliment. "Thanks, Scott. Come, I'll show you how I organize the plants." The two went to the garden, chatting cheerfully about plants, trips, and recent news. Scott listened attentively, and Emily was surprised to see someone genuinely interested in what she had to say. "You know, you could easily work as a landscape designer if you wanted to," he suggested, his eyes shining. Emily laughed. "Oh, I don't know if I could. Besides, who will take care of the house?" Scott shrugged. "Well, if I had a wife who handled everything like you do, I'd give her all the support she needed to pursue whatever she wanted." The comment stayed in Emily's mind longer than she cared to admit. With each subsequent visit, Scott and Emily conversed more openly, shared confidences, and laughed together. Michael, even when present, seemed distant, and Scott filled the emotional void that was growing within Emily. He brought a sense of novelty and freedom that made her feel heard and understood. "You must feel really lonely, Emily, with Michael always so busy," Scott said one night as they washed dishes together. "Sometimes, yes," Emily replied, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. "I know you deserve more," he continued, putting a plate in the rack. "Anyone can see how amazing you are." Emily and Scott were seated in a quiet corner of a small cafe, far from the bustling city center. They had met there to talk away from Michael's gaze, and their conversations, once simple, had become more intimate, full of secrets and hesitations. Emily stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her eyes avoiding Scott's. He, however, couldn't take his eyes off her, watching as she bit her lower lip thoughtfully. With each shy smile she gave, he felt his desire grow, but he fought to keep it under control. "Have you been feeling any better lately?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. Emily looked at him with a melancholy expression. "Not really. I feel like Michael and I are growing further apart. Everything seems like an effort. Have you talked to him about it? She sighed, playing with the spoon inside the cup. I tried, but he doesn't listen. Or maybe I'm the one who doesn't know how to communicate. It feels like I'm talking to a wall. Scott leaned in closer. I listen to you, Emily. She finally looked at him, her eyes locking onto his in a long, silent moment. The intensity of Scott's gaze broke through her defenses, and she felt warmth rise up her spine. Scott, she began, but the words got stuck in her throat. He reached across the table and touched her hand. You don't need to say anything. His palm pressed against hers, and they remained still. The connection they felt through their gaze and touch spoke volumes about what they were too afraid to say. The cafe noise, the clinking cups, and the chatter around them felt distant. All that mattered was that moment. Scott. I can't do this. I know, he replied, lowering his head. But why is it so hard to stay away from you? Emily smiled sadly. Maybe because we have something we're not ready to admit. The tension between them intensified until Scott couldn't resist any longer. He leaned forward and kissed her lips. The contact was brief but filled with overwhelming intensity. When they pulled away, they remained silent, staring at each other with their hearts racing. I didn't want it to be like this, but I can't help it, Scott said, his breath heavy. Emily held his hand, her emotions blending into confusion. I can't either, she murmured, looking down, feeling the weight of the moment. After that afternoon in the cafe, Emily and Scott could hardly focus on anything but the growing attraction between them. In the following days, they continued exchanging messages, each one more intense and charged with desire. The words on the screens were like fuel to the fire burning between them. Finally, one afternoon while Michael was stuck at the office, Emily and Scott found a moment to see each other alone. Scott took her to a discreet motel on the outskirts of town. The place was simple but provided the necessary anonymity for them to surrender to their feelings. Inside the room, Scott looked at Emily, seeing in her a mix of anxiety and anticipation. He took a step forward and held her hands. Are you sure you want this? Emily took a deep breath and simply nodded. I can't hold back anymore. Scott's hands gently caressed her face, making her shiver. He kissed her softly at first, but soon the kiss grew more intense, and they lost themselves in each other, hands exploring and sliding. The afternoon passed slowly, and time seemed suspended for them. Whispers, muffled laughter, warm touches, and lingering kisses filled the room, each gesture fueling the growing desire. After the passion subsided, they lay together, still feeling the warmth of their closeness. I should feel guilty, but I can't, murmured Scott, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Emily rolled to the side, propping herself up on her elbow. Neither can I, she replied with a sad smile. I know we're crossing a dangerous line, but I don't regret it. Scott pulled her closer, holding her in a silent embrace. Both knew that what they had in that moment was fleeting and full of risks, but they also knew that the desire between them wouldn't be easily extinguished. Later, Emily got up from the bed and began to dress, knowing she had to return before Michael suspected anything. Will we meet again? Scott asked, still reclining in bed. I don't know if I can keep a secret affair like this. We shouldn't have done this. Scott nodded, and she leaned over to kiss him before leaving the room, feeling a mix of fear and regret. Michael began to notice the lingering looks between Emily and Scott, as well as the shared laughter, inside jokes, and the comfortable closeness they maintained. Each moment seemed to isolate Michael more, and he started feeling like a stranger in his own home. One night, he walked into the living room and found the two talking and exchanging knowing smiles. When they saw Michael, they quickly tried to cover up, but the awkward silence that followed reinforced his suspicions. Oh, hey, Michael, said Scott, trying to maintain his composure. We were just talking. Sure, Michael replied, with an unreadable expression. About what? Work stuff, Emily quickly intervened, avoiding Michael's gaze. I see, he responded, nodding slowly. After that, he watched from a distance as Emily and Scott exchanged uneasy looks and reverted to casual behavior. Michael kept his neutral expression, but a chill ran down his spine. He decided he needed concrete evidence before confronting them. In the following days, Michael began observing their movements more closely. He noticed that Emily was responding to messages more frequently and seemed more reserved than usual. Scott, who used to be outgoing and talkative, now avoided conversations with Michael whenever possible. One morning, while Emily was busy in the kitchen, Michael approached her, trying to keep his tone casual. "You and Scott have been talking quite a bit lately, haven't you?" Emily stopped stirring the pan and slowly turned toward him.
"Oh, yes. He needs help with some things at work." Michael frowned. "And why does he need your help? Doesn't he have other colleagues?" She shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned. "Well, he doesn't know many people around here. I'm just being nice." Michael didn't push further. He simply nodded and left the kitchen. He knew it would be pointless to force a confrontation without more information, but he remained alert for any sign. The following days were marked by Michael's anxiety, as he began to observe the two of them more closely. He noticed frequent messages on Emily's phone and strange behavior from Scott, who seemed to avoid eye contact. The uneasiness consumed Michael until he could no longer ignore the signs. One day, he left work early and went straight home. He found Emily alone in the kitchen, looking at her phone. When she saw him, she tried to hide the device, but Michael had already seen Scott's name on the screen. "Michael!" she exclaimed, trying to maintain a normal tone. "You're home early today." He walked toward her, resolutely. "Yes, I left early because I needed to talk to you." Emily saw Michael's tense face and knew she couldn't hide the truth any longer. "Michael," she began, but he interrupted her. "You're having an affair with Scott, aren't you?" He held the phone she had in her hand, without breaking eye contact. She felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. It wasn't, she tried, but shame and regret made her hesitate. "Wasn't what? Wasn't a mistake? A betrayal? You slept with my brother, Emily." Scott entered the house at that moment, immediately stopping when he saw Michael standing in the kitchen, holding Emily's phone. "Michael, I can explain," Scott began, but Michael's furious gaze silenced him. "You've done enough, Scott. Leave now," Michael ordered, almost growling. Scott hung his head, feeling the wave of shame and guilt overwhelm him. "I'm so sorry, brother." "Don't call me brother," Michael said, clenching his fists. "You have no place here anymore." Scott didn't argue. He grabbed his things and immediately left the house, leaving a heavy silence behind. When the door closed, Emily tried to approach Michael. "Please, listen to me. I'm so sorry." "Sorry? How could you do this to me?" He stepped back, his voice breaking. "I trusted you. I thought we were something special." With tears in her eyes, Emily whispered. "I was weak. I felt so lonely. Please, Michael, give me a chance to fix this." But Michael couldn't look at her without feeling the sting of betrayal in his soul. He walked out of the kitchen, saying only, "I can't do this anymore." And so, the house that used to be a cozy home was filled with pain and distance, as Michael avoided Emily, trying to escape the reality of what had happened. She pleaded for a chance at redemption, but all he could think about was the devastating betrayal that had left him shattered. After the devastating discovery, Michael buried himself deeper in work, using the office as a refuge from the painful memories his home now harbored. He spent nights at the company, immersed in projects and reports. When he finally returned home, he found Emily asleep in the guest room, where he had confined her after discovering the affair. Emily, for her part, tried everything she could to reach Michael. She waited for him in the living room, cooked his favorite dishes, and left apology notes on the bathroom mirror. However, he ignored all these gestures, maintaining a silence that cut deeper than any cruel word. One night, as he ate quietly in the kitchen, she walked in and sat down at the table. "Michael, please, we need to talk," she asked, her face marked with regret. He didn't even lift his eyes from his plate. "What else is there to talk about? You said everything when you chose my brother." She took a deep breath. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I'm willing to do anything to fix this. Michael finally looked up at her, his face expressionless. And what do you think you can do? How will you erase what you've done? Emily lowered her head, unable to find a direct answer. I can't erase it. I know that. But I love you, Michael. I've always loved you, and I want to try and rebuild what we lost. Michael just shook his head and got up from the table, leaving her alone. Months passed since Scott left town, leaving behind the chaos of his betrayal. Michael couldn't face Emily as he used to, and the two agreed to separate for a while. He moved into a small apartment near work, where he buried himself in projects, trying to find some sense of normalcy. Meanwhile, Emily stayed in the house, feeling the emptiness Michael had left. The separation was painful, but she understood he needed space and accepted his absence, maintaining a respectful distance and giving him time. Weeks accumulated, and Michael realized that the solitude in the apartment was more oppressive than he had imagined. He found himself thinking of Emily frequently, remembering the days before everything fell apart, when they'd sit together on the couch and laugh about trivial things, or how she would make his favorite meal when he was exhausted from work. Those memories led him to pick up his phone one night and send a brief message to Emily. "How are you?" Emily, surprised by the contact, replied, "I'm doing well. How about you?" "Getting by. One day at a time," he typed. They continued exchanging messages sporadically over the following weeks. They were short conversations, but filled with an implicit longing. Michael asked about the garden, the books Emily was reading, and if she had tried any new recipes. Her answers were always gentle and careful, never pressuring him to discuss deeper matters. After a few weeks, Michael began to feel a subtle warmth in his chest each time he saw a new message from Emily. He remembered the kind gestures that once marked their relationship. One afternoon, he decided to call her. "Michael?" Emily's voice came from the other end, a little apprehensive.
Emily.
"I was thinking, could we have coffee together tomorrow?" There was a brief silence before she replied. "Sure. That would be nice." The next day, they met at a quiet cafe. They sat across from each other, initially a little uncomfortable, but soon they began to talk. Michael asked about Emily's work, and she told him about the new projects she was trying to undertake. He listened attentively, asking questions and smiling occasionally. "It's been hard for me too," Michael admitted after a pause. I miss having you around." Emily looked at him with surprise. "Really?" "Yes. I miss you. But I'm still trying to understand how to move forward." "We don't have to rush anything," she calmly replied. "Let's keep talking." Michael's heart began to soften, the resentment giving way to a small spark of hope. He knew that reconciliation was still far off, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that there could be a way back. The night Michael decided to open his heart to Emily and try again, he left work early with a plan: to listen and speak honestly and transparently, something he hadn't done in a long time. He was determined to rebuild the bridge between them. Before leaving, however, he received an urgent phone call. "Mr. Michael Reynolds?" asked an unfamiliar voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, that's me." "Who's calling?" "This is St. Clair Hospital. Your wife, Emily, was in a car accident. Can you come here immediately?" Michael felt the ground drop out from under his feet. He could hardly believe it, but he heard the person repeat the words, trying to keep him calm. Without hesitation, he dropped everything, grabbed his car keys, and sped to the hospital. On the way, thoughts tumbled through his mind, blending with the hum of the engine. He tried to remember the last time he said "I love you" to Emily, or when they had laughed together without the weight of tension between them. Every memory seemed like a cruel reminder of what he had lost by keeping silent for so long. At the hospital, a nurse led him down the corridor to the emergency room. He tried to hold her hand, but she pulled away. "I'll call the doctor, sir." Michael waited impatiently, watching nurses rush by. The doctor appeared shortly after, with a serious expression. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife didn't survive her injuries from the accident." Michael froze, his words caught in his throat. He looked at the doctor, unable to accept the reality. "No, this can't be. I need to see her. Where is she?" "We'll take you to her, but prepare yourself. She sustained severe injuries." On the way to the room, Michael struggled to hold on to hope, but when he entered and saw Emily unconscious, he realized his worst nightmare had come true. He approached the bed, tears streaming down his face. "Emily, forgive me," he murmured, his voice breaking, the pain seizing his chest. "I should have forgiven you earlier. I wanted to tell you that I love you." But there was no response. He held her hand, cold and motionless, and cried until he could no longer. At the hospital, Michael stood by the bed where Emily had spent her final moments. The room was cold and silent, with only the hum of medical equipment in the background, now serving no purpose. The nurse accompanying him placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Reynolds. If you need anything, I'm here." Michael nodded, but barely registered her words. He was absorbed, lost in thoughts about all the things he wished he had said and done. He remembered the plans for reconciliation and how he had waited for that night to finally open his heart. He looked at Emily's face, peaceful even in death, and whispered, Emily, I'm so sorry. I should have been stronger. I wanted to forgive you. I wished we could try together." The pain was suffocating, the mixture of regret and guilt making it hard to breathe. Words intertwined in his throat. I know you did what you could, that you tried to talk to me, and I didn't listen. I just wanted one more chance to start over." He squeezed her cold hand, as if he could feel the strength returning. But there was nothing there but the harsh reality of an unexpected goodbye. He knew the betrayal would still be present, but he also knew he would never have the chance to mend what was broken. In the days that followed, he found himself caught up in the formalities of the funeral and the empty words of comfort from friends and family. Scott called once, but Michael rejected the call. He didn't have the strength to face his brother, nor did he want to confront his own feelings. After the burial, Michael returned home, feeling Emily's absence in every corner. Her things remained as she had left them, the furniture, the clothes, even the letters on the hallway table. The letter she had written to him, confessing her mistakes and asking for forgiveness, was on the counter, crumpled and worn. He picked it up and reread it, every word weighing on him like an anchor. She wrote about her love for him, her willingness to fix things and move forward together. Michael broke down, sobbing alone in the house that had once been filled with hope and plans for the future. I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." Now he would have to face not only the pain of betrayal, but also the harsh reality of continuing alone, dealing with the bitter sense of farewell and the weight of a future without answers. He knew guilt would be a constant companion, but he also decided that, out of respect for her and what they had shared, he would do his best to find peace and a new beginning.